Hello everyone, welcome back. So today I want to talk about using a red dot, an ACSS red dot on an AR-47 to shoot out to 500 yards. Okay, so this is the Holosun 503G. It's got the ACSS red dot, which basically gives you a bullet drop compensator. And I'm going to post an image so that you guys can see what this reticle looks like when you're actually looking through it. Okay. So now when you're looking at this image, it's hard to make out the details. You have to use a magnifier. Okay, so you have to use at least a 3x magnifier to see the details of the reticle, specifically to see the 3 dots underneath the chevron. If you're using a 6x magnifier, even better. Okay, so with this 3x magnifier, yeah, you can get on. You have a wider field of view. Okay, which does allow you to search a little bit better. However, the way I use this red dot 6x magnifier combination, right, is the Vortex 6x, is I mainly keep the magnifier off, right? I'll use that to get on target. Once I get on target, then I'll flip this on, right, and I'm there. I'm on target, right? So that's how I use the magnifier. I don't like flip the magnifier on and then try to search because the field of view is just too little. Okay, so basically I keep the magnifier off, get on target, then flip the magnifier on, and now I can basically focus on my target and take my shots. Having shot 300, 400, 500 yards with this combination, right? It works really good. Okay. Now, just for sake of comparison, okay, over here I've got the Primary Arms PLX 1:8 scope. Okay, so this is a $1,500 scope. So this is like top of the line. So with this scope over here, when I'm shooting at distance, what I always have to do is I always have to dial down to 1 power, right? Get on target, and then when I'm on target, basically I have to dial up while staying on target, right? That's how I find my target at distance. So that dialing up and then dialing back down takes extra time. They typically make these dials pretty tight so that they don't move while you're shooting. So what I find is that for practical combat shooting, it is a lot easier to just flip this back and forth. Okay, so I'm just using the red dot here. Flip this up. I'm on target. Take my shots. Flip it off. Okay, so I have found that to be a lot easier. And also with this, I have the ability to lighten the gun, okay? So let's say at night, or if I'm going to be indoors, or if I don't think I'm going to be shooting a distance, right? This has the quick detach, and I can quickly take the magnifier off. I can't do that with the LPVO, right? I can't lighten up the LPVO. I can't take half of a scope off. Okay? Now, in this video, we're specifically going to be talking about the holding points if you're shooting 7.62 by 3.9, okay, your typical AK-47 round. I've done a number of videos where I have this combination on a 5.56 gun. Okay, so on a 5.56, first of all, let me show you what the image, the blow up of the image. Okay, so you got your 65 MOA outer horseshoe, right? That's this blue over here. Then you've got your chevron, and then you got your 3 dots underneath. Okay, so when you use a 6x magnifier, it's going to blow up really nice. You're going to, the 3 dots are going to space out. If you're looking at this without a magnifier, like this whole thing is just going to blend. You're going to see almost like an arrow. Okay, you're not going to be able to make out the separation between the 3 dots. So you have to use at least the 3x magnifier, and the 6x is better. The benefits of using a 6x outweigh using a 3x. A lot of times people say, hey, if the 6x is too narrow a field of view. But the thing is, I'm not searching with the magnifier on. I'm just using the 1x to search, to look, get on target, and then I just flip the magnifier over to 6x when I'm already on the target. Okay, so that's an important aspect of using a 6x. So if you have 5.56, right, usually you'll use the tip of the chevron to zero in, let's say, at 50 yards. I'll confirm that tip at at 200 yards, right? So and it's really more important that I confirm at 200 yards. I don't care if it shifts a quarter inch or up or down at 50 yards. So basically, the tip is 200 yards, 0. The legs over here is 300 yards, right? The first dot is 400 yards. Second dot, 500 yards. The last dot is 600 yards. I've tested this thing out to 500 yards using the middle dot. It works really good. It really doesn't make that much of a difference if you're using a 55 grain or a 62 grain or 77 grain. You know, if you're shooting at a man-sized target, right? If you're trying to hit a torso, like if you're shooting, let's say, a 55 grain, you might hit here. If you're using a 62 grain, you might hit a little bit lower. To 500 yards, it doesn't make that much of a difference. You can still get on your target and make combat effective hits. And when I test this out, I use basically a 3 foot by 2 foot paper. So I use basically one that's half the size of a man. You don't have to use paper. You can use like a cardboard box. That'll work just as fine. So there's lots of information out there. Lots of guys shoot this with 5.56. But the question now is, what happens when you shoot it with 7.62 by 3.9? So like I said, I did take this. I did have a 2.5 to 20. It was a Night Force 2.5 20 on this AR-47. I did a video with that a couple months ago. Had it out to 500 yards. It was pretty easy to make shots. This gun is extremely accurate, even with steel case ammunition. At 100 and 200 yards with Red Army Standard and Tula White Box, I have hit 1 MOA groups. When I was shooting the 400 and 500 yards, I was getting like 2.6 MOA and like 2.8 MOA. So I was inside of 3 MOA at 400 and 500 yards when there was like relatively low wind. Now, when I went out there and I had this combo on here, right, the red dot with the magnifier, it was a very windy day, right? So I had 2 issues. Because again, I wasn't exactly sure what the holding points needed to be, right, with this reticle using 7.62 by 3.9. So my goal that day was to figure out those holding points. And when I got to 500 yards, yeah, the wind did kind of mess with me. I did a prior video on this because I ended up, like, at 500 yards, I had to hold like almost 3 feet to the left in order to make hits. And it was really hard to tell. Basically, I had to find an area because where I had my target set up, I couldn't see any impacts because of the way the backstop was set up. But I did find another area that I was able to shoot into where I could actually see impacts, and then I could say, oh, okay, great, at 500 yards, this needs to be my hold. Okay, so that's an important part, and that's one of the reasons why you got to have a magnifier so that you can spot those impacts and know what corrections you need to make. Okay? And here's the thing, in that same area, if I had done this like in the summertime where the grass was a lot taller, there's no way I would have been able to spot the impacts because like we're in the early spring, grass really hasn't started growing yet. That's the reason why I was able to spot the impacts and I was able to gather the data that I needed. Okay, so with this ACSS using 7.62 by 3.9, okay, basically I wanted to have a 200 yard 0 at the tip. Okay, so the 200 yard 0 at the tip ended up being, because I started off with a 50 yard 0, and then basically I worked my way up to 200 yards and I corrected. So I got my 200 yard 0, and then I went back and I figured out that, hey, I'm impacting at 20, basically my first 0 is at 25 yards. So if you're using a 25 yard 0, that will get you at the tip. That'll get you very close to a second 0 at 200 yards. At 100 yards, you're going to be 3 inches high. Okay, if you're shooting 5.56, you're only going to be 2 inches high. So with the 7.62 by 3.9, all right, 25, 200 yard 0, you're going to be 3 inches high at 100 yards. Okay, so the legs over here are 300 yards. Okay, so that worked out almost exactly the same way as the 5.56 did. So basically, if I put the legs here at the center, in the center of the torso of the target, that's about where I'm going to impact. Okay, so that worked out perfectly. Okay, at 400 yards, it got a little bit tricky because I had a 3 foot by 2 foot paper, right? So what I did is, when I put that first dot underneath the paper, I was impacting like into the belly area, which I thought, you know, hey, I'd like to have it a little bit faster. I'd like to have it a little bit higher, right? So when I put the dot on top of the paper, I impacted into the high chest area. So if you want to get it perfect, right? Basically, you got to put this at 400 yards. You got to put this dot on the face, okay, in order to impact into the chest, right? Using this 200 yard zero, okay. Now I didn't test 450 yards, okay, but the second dot here would be about 450 yards. I can't tell you exactly where it's going to impact. I didn't do it that day. I went straight to 500 because that's really what I wanted to know. At 500 yards, what I found is if I put the dot on the chest, I impacted right on that same line. Okay, so the third dot, okay, is going to get you perfect impacts. You know, not, you know, I mean, they're going to open up a little bit, but the elevation is going to be there. Okay. So that's how that worked out. Now, again, if I was shooting 5.56, this third dot would be 600 yards, okay? So because we're shooting 7.62 by 3.9, the last dot here ended up being 500 yards, okay? Now, the way this is set up, if I've got at 400 yards, I gotta go face with the dot, okay? At 400 yards, I gotta go face with the first dot, and then at 500 yards, I gotta go chest. An easy way to remember it, because sometimes you can kind of get mixed up which one you gotta go face, which one you gotta go chest. If you just go neck, right, into the neck area, you're gonna get your hits, right? So that's an easy way to remember. If you got this 25 200 yard zero, you know, where you're hitting about 3 inches high at 100 yards. If you aim at the neck, or basically what I would do is if I shoot this again, what I would do is if the paper's here, I would basically split the dot on the top edge. So half the dot's above, half the dot's below, and that'll give me reasonably good impacts, regardless whether I'm shooting 400 yards or 500 yards. Okay, so yeah, this is something I wanted to test out. I knew that it was going to be something like this, but I did have to, you know, go through a little bit of trial and error just to test it. The hard part was the wind, especially when I was shooting the 500 yards, because it was just blowing so hard, and it was inconsistent. It wasn't like the wind, because the wind was actually coming straight in, right? So I had a 10 to, it was at times it was going up to 20, but most of the times it was like 10 to 15 miles per hour shooting straight in. So I had a headwind, right, which is slowing down the bullets a little bit. So if I go on a nicer day, what we might find is that that my impacts might be a little bit higher. So I was shooting into a strong 10 to 15 mile per hour headwind, right? The wind's coming straight in, but then the wind was also sometimes you go left, it would go right. Sometimes it would come in on this side, sometimes I would feel it on this side, and it would just kind of shift back and forth. So you know, and still that was still enough. At 500 yards, it was moving the bullets almost like a full 3 feet. Okay, you know, it was moving the bullets 2 to 3 feet when it was gusting. Most of the time, it was gusting left to right. So what I ended up doing is I ended up taking two papers, 2 foot by 3 foot. So I put two of them side by side. All right, so I actually had 4 foot of paper, and that's how I was able to really I was holding on the top left corner, and then I could see out the wind, depending on how hard it was gusting to the left to right. I could see it would actually kind of drag the bullets towards the right. But at least I figured out what my elevation is. I know exactly what I got to hold to. Now, one of the great things about this reticle, right, is that this horseshoe and this chevron and the 3 dots allow us to do range estimating on a man-sized target, right? So basically, at 100 yards, right, your man is going to stand with his feet at the bottom of the horseshoe, right, over here where the red is, and his head's going to come to the top of the horseshoe, okay? So that's going to be 100 yards, okay? At 200 yards, his feet are going to be at the tip, and his head's going to come to the top of the circle, okay? That's 200 yards. Fuck this wrong. So at 300 yards, your man's going to come up 2/3 of the way, okay? So his feet are going to be at the tip, and then his head's going to come up 2/3, all right? So that's 300 yards. At 400 yards, he's going to come up half, all right? So his feet are going to be at the tip, and his head's going to come up to the halfway point from the top of the circle. Okay, at 500 yards, his feet are going to come to the bottom dot, and his head's going to come up to the legs of the chevron. Okay, so that's going to be 500 yards, and at 600 yards, he's going to be the length of the 3 dots. Okay, so his feet are going to come to the bottom dot, and his head's going to come to the top dot. Okay, so you can use this reticle to range estimate the average size of a man. Now, when you're range estimating a man, and you find that, hey, you're not quite sure, he could be like in between this or in between that, what you do is you go to the closer distance. Okay, so if it could be like either 400 or 500, you go with 400. Okay, if you can be like either 500 or 600, you get a 500. Okay, so you always go to the closer one, because normally we're holding at the chest. Okay, and what happens is if you range estimate a little bit further than he actually is, the bullets are going to go over his head. However, if you range estimate closer, right, and you're aiming at the chest, well, if you're off, then you're just going to impact a little bit lower. You're going to impact into the hip. Okay, so if it, because most of the time when you're range estimating, especially if the target's moving, you're going to be like, okay, it could be this or that. You're going to favor closer rather than further away. Okay, so so that's those are the holding points on the ACSS red dot using the 7.62 by 3.9. Okay, so drop some comments. Let me know what you guys think. I'll talk to you soon. Hey, the other thing I forgot to mention is that the tip of the legs of the arrow, okay, that's your 5 mile per hour wind hold. Okay, so if you know that if you have a consistent, let's say 5 mile per hour wind that's left to right, that's what you will hold on. Okay, you can hold on all the way down. Now, if it's double, if you think it's 10 miles per hour, you would just double that. Okay. Realistically, most of the time when you're shooting, the wind is just going to be so inconsistent if you got wind that you just kind of like have to make your best guess, because like I said, in my case, it was kind of like going back and forth, and it really helps if you can spot the impacts. Shooting the 500 yards, okay. What I found is that at 500 yards, like if this is, let's say, a man's torso at 500 yards over here, I had to hold, left. Like if the man's torso is my finger there, I had to hold left. The dot was like completely to the left in order to make my hits. And like I said, the wind was like 10 to 15 miles per hour straight in. Sideway wind was probably the equivalent of 5 miles per hour. Okay, so like I said, I was about that. That's effectively where I was holding.
All right, AR-47, 500 yards. All right, let's go see what we did. All right, so shot 5 shots, 500 yards, 7.62 by 3.9, using the third dot, holding outside the paper all the way up here. Okay, and we got 3 hits. 1, 2, 3 over there. Now the wind was very inconsistent. I think the 2 of the shots probably went in here. I think I heard a ding. I might have actually clipped the pole over here. So it's like the wind is like going on and off, on and off. I mean, I have a really strong headwind that's like 10 to 15 miles per hour. And then sometimes that applies to sideways first. Like sometimes I'll feel it left. Sometimes you'll give me like, it's 10 to 15 miles headwind, but then it'll go back and forth between pushing a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. I would say the sideways pressure is like 5 miles per hour on and off. So yeah, I mean the wind is the real struggle today. But I did figure out my elevation now. Okay, so I know for sure that with 200 yard zero, 762 by 39, third dot underneath the top of the paper. Now, because of the headwind, chances are, like if I have no headwind, it might rise a little bit. So that's something I gotta test on a different day when I don't have a headwind. But yeah, I mean, we can definitely put effective fire at 500 yards with this red dot. Now, I have shot this with a scope on it. With the scope, I got a really nice group. I think it was on a day that wasn't windy, so I think I got like a 2.6 MOA at 500 yards with same ammunition, Red Army standard. So the issue today is really the wind more than anything else.